Devil fruits and weapons aren't the only way to fight in the One Piece world. There's also HAKI, a complex set of moves that involves manipulating one's spiritual energy to produce a variety of effects. There are 3 types: Houshoku HAKI, which lets the user control another person's will, Busoshoku HAKI, which lets the user harness their spiritual energy for defensive and offensive purposes, and Kanban Choka HAKI, which imbues sensory abilities. If you're a One Piece fan, you most likely knew all of that, but there might be some things you didn't know about HAKI. HAKI is a Japanese term that likely derives from the Chinese concept of chi. But it's also the name of a famous Scandinavian sea king in Norse mythology. Also, did you know that Shanks and Silver's Rayleigh are potentially capable of knocking out 100,000 people at once with their HAKI? Number 1. So far, every Houshoku HAKI user who works under another person has had a boss who also uses Houshoku HAKI. For example, Zoro uses this form of HAKI, and so does his captain Luffy. The same applies to Charlotte Katakuri and Charlotte Linlin, Rayleigh, Shanks, Odin, and Bullet and their captain Gold-D, Roger, as well as Odin and Ace and their captain Whitebeard. There are a few examples where it's unclear whether the captain uses Houshoku HAKI or not. Whitebeard, Big Mom, and Kaido all once served Rocksteady, Zebek, who isn't known to use Houshoku HAKI but probably does given his legendary status. Number 2. In most parts of the One Piece world, Busoshoku HAKI is known by one name. But in Wano country, it's called Ryuo. This literally translates to flowing sakura, and is a reference to the concept of inner flow. Number 3. In the manga, HAKI isn't really a visible thing. Other than a character's body turning black when they harden it, there aren't too many visual effects in the manga. The anime is another story. Characters who use HAKI might have colored auras. Luffy's is red and Doflamingo's is purple, for example. These auras may appear even if they aren't actively using HAKI. Also, there are special effects like the ripple effect that Houshoku and Busoshoku HAKI produces, or the flower petal particles that appear with advanced Busoshoku HAKI. Number 4. Kanban Choka HAKI lets the user sense other people's presence, as well as their strength and emotional state. It would be reasonable to think that this would only work on living beings, but there's some evidence that it might work on cursed items as well. That's because both Zoro and Luffy, Kanban Choka HAKI users, were able to sense the presence of cursed swords based on their aura. Number 5. While it is quite rare, it is possible for animals to learn how to use HAKI. So far, there have been 2 examples of this. Alpaca Chino, an alpaca who is part of the Neo Marines, once used Busoshoku HAKI to ramp up the power of his cannonballs, allowing him to damage Luffy. The captain of the sea animal pirates, a Kung Fu Dugong, can also use Busoshoku HAKI. These examples are from filler episodes, so it's up to you whether or not you want to consider this canon. Number 6. In the anime, a person who gets hit with Houshoku HAKI usually passes out. In the manga, it's a little more dramatic. Instead of simply losing consciousness, they foam at the mouth. Number 7. Houshoku HAKI involves enforcing your will on other people. It's quite difficult to master, so only those with serious talent can make it happen. This might be why every known person who can use Houshoku HAKI can also use every other type of HAKI. Clearly, they have high abilities. Number 8. HAKI is a version of a type of power that appears in many anime. A person is able to use their spiritual energy in order to achieve something. In Dragon Ball Z, this is called Ki. In Yu Yu Hakusho, it's called spirit energy. Whatever it's called, it's based on a Chinese concept called Qi, which refers to the vital energy that exists within all living things. Number 9. Nearly every user of Houshoku HAKI is or has been a pirate at some point in their lifetimes. But there is one exception: Sengoku, an inspector general for the Marines. Sengoku has never been a pirate in his life, but he still found it useful to be able to exert his will over others. Number 10. While all three forms of HAKI have plenty of users, the most commonly used variety by far is Byusohoku HAKI. While the reason for this has not been confirmed, it seems likely that it's because Byusohoku HAKI has the most obvious application in fights. Number 11. A fan noted that when Luffy used Houshoku HAKI, he was able to eliminate about 50,000 men at once. They wondered what Shanks or Silvers really might be able to do that under the same circumstances. Oda had a detailed explanation. In exactly the same place and exact same situation as Luffy, Shanks or Rayleigh may have been capable of knocking out all 100,000. In a different setting, you can't really compare just by asking how many people. Being able to knock an enemy out with HAKI depends entirely on having an overwhelming power gap between the two. In Luffy's case, the point is the number of people that were so weak that they were not even worth him fighting. If there were 100,000 to some extent strong-willed pirates before him, it's possible that he wouldn't even be able to knock out a single one. On a related note, as one's proficiency with Houshoku advances, it's even possible to target a few people in a crowd to not knock out. Number 12. In Skypiea, there's a concept called mantra. While this might seem like it's a unique concept, it's actually exactly the same thing as Kanban Choka HAKI. A fan guessed as much and asked Oda to confirm. Here's what he said: yes. You are very right. Well, in volume 61, Rayleigh says it clearly from his mouth though. Even though the concept is the same, there are cases where it depends on the country for what you call it. Therefore, exactly. Number 13. Byusohoku Choka is a move that lets the user coat a selected body part with HAKI, hardening it and increasing its defensive capacity. While anyone who uses this type of HAKI can perform this basic function, the name itself is connected with Luffy specifically. Choka translates to vulcanization, which is the process of hardening rubber. Number 14. Byusohoku HAKI isn't the only way to harden one's body. You can also use Tekai, a Rokushiki technique that's used by the CP9. Byusohoku HAKI requires willpower and life force, while Tekai requires raw physical power. The other difference is that both Tekai and Byusohoku HAKI have unique weaknesses. While Tekai is great for defense, the user is largely immobile and may be unable to strike their opponents. Byusohoku HAKI doesn't have this problem, but it can drain the user's energy after too much use. Do you agree with our lists or did we miss something? Write it down in the comment section. Also, don't forget to subscribe.